Fukushima, the costliest disaster in history, Japan. 10 years have passed since the Fukushima earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear disaster on March 11, 2011. The largest earthquake ever recorded in Japan caused massive devastation, and the ensuing tsunami decimated the Tōhoku region of northeastern Honshu. On top of the already horrific destruction and loss of life, the natural disaster also gave rise to a nuclear disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. The Fukushima disaster is considered the second worst nuclear disaster in history, forcing the relocation of over 100,000 people. So how did the Fukushima disaster affect Japan, and how was it managed? Before we begin, make sure to smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos. The 2011 disaster at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant was the worst nuclear event since the meltdown at Chernobyl in the former Soviet Union 25 years prior. It started with an earthquake and resulted in 465,000 evacuations, $360 billion in economic losses, and increased radiation levels in Tokyo, 140 miles away. As with most disasters, several things had to go wrong to produce such a catastrophic outcome. The Tōhoku earthquake was so severe that the country moved a few meters east. The local coastline dropped, and it triggered a tsunami which killed thousands of people. But what many people outside Japan remember is the nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, hereafter just Fukushima, which released a plume of radiation into the surrounding area and ocean. The disaster took place just as some nations were considering the idea of a nuclear renaissance. The impact of Fukushima on the nuclear industry was severe in Japan and beyond. The Tōhoku earthquake. Japan is located in one of the most seismic areas in the world. It has a long history of dealing with earthquakes. On March 11, 2011, an earthquake hit just 43 miles off the Tōhoku coast of eastern Japan and was followed quickly by a tsunami set off by the mighty tremor. When the tsunami came ashore, it submerged the towns of Okuma and Futaba in the prefecture of Fukushima, the home of the massive Daiichi nuclear power plant. The Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, located on the coastline, was designed to withstand a 5.7-meter tsunami. The one that struck the plant was around 15 meters high. The magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck at 2:46 p.m. The early estimate of magnitude 8.9 was later revised upward. The epicenter was located some 80 miles, 130 kilometers east of the city of Sendai, Miyagi Prefecture, and the focus occurred at a depth of 18.6 miles, about 30 kilometers below the floor of the Western Pacific Ocean. The earthquake was caused by the rupture of a stretch of the subduction zone associated with the Japan Trench, which separates the Eurasian plate from the subducting Pacific plate. Some geologists argue that this portion of the Eurasian plate is actually a fragment of the North American plate called the Ohatsu microplate. A part of the subduction zone measuring approximately 190 miles, 300 kilometers long by 95 miles, 150 kilometers wide, lurched as much as 164 feet, 50 meters, to the east-southeast that thrust upward around 33 feet, 10 meters. The March 11 trembler was felt as far away as Petropavlovsky Kamenetsky, Russia, Kaohsiung, Taiwan, and Beijing, China. Amazingly, the 6-minute quake was so severe that it caused the Earth to shift on its axis. It even redistributed the mass of the Earth and in the process shortened the length of a day by 1.8 microseconds and altered the Earth's axis by somewhere between 4 and 10 inches. Those are some Earth-shattering effects. Yet the quake had been the only element of the multifaceted disaster. The damage inflicted on the area would have been less severe. Strikingly, the Fukushima reactors easily survived the massive tremor. Although the Daiichi plant lost power, backup generators kept the nuclear material cool, and all the reactors remained safe. Of significant concern following the main shock and tsunami was the status of several nuclear power stations in the Tōhoku region. The reactors at the 3 nuclear power plants closest to the quake's epicenter was shut down automatically. Following the trembler, which also cut the main power of those plants and their cooling systems, however, inundation by the tsunami waves damaged the backup generators at some of those plants, most notably at the Fukushima Daiichi, number 1 plant, situated along the Pacific coast of northeastern Fukushima Prefecture, about 60 miles south of Sendai. With power gone, the cooling systems failed in 3 reactors within the first few days of the disaster, and their cores subsequently overheated, leading to partial meltdowns of the fuel rods. Some plant workers, however, attributed at least one partial meltdown to coolant pipe bursts caused by the earthquake's ground vibrations. Melted material fell to the bottom of the containment vessel in reactors 1 and 2 and burned sizable holes through the floor of each vessel, while partially exposed the nuclear material in the cores. Explosions resulting from the buildup of pressurized hydrogen gas in the outer containment buildings enclosed reactors 1, 2, and 3 along with a fire touched off by rising temperatures and spent fuel rods stored in reactors 4, led to the release of significant levels of radiation from the facility in the days and weeks following the earthquake. Workers sought to cool and stabilize the damaged reactors by pumping seawater and boric acid into them. Measurements by the Japanese government show that the first 6 weeks of the disaster, 42% of the total amount of cesium that was released at the Chernobyl disaster is spread, together with the highest ever release of the radioactive noble gas xenon. After the explosions, also radioactive strontium, up to 250 kilometers from the plants, and plutonium, up to 45 kilometers from the plants, are measured, in addition to iodine and cesium. Levels of radioactivity at the site were reduced by collecting the highly radioactive debris, but values up to 10,000 were still measured at the exhaust stack between reactors 1 and 2. All highly radioactive debris is stored temporarily on the grounds in the Fukushima prefecture. The radioactive material was first blown towards the Pacific by the wind. After the explosion of Reactor 3, the wind direction changed, and regions more to the northwest of the accident got contaminated. Particularly high levels of radiation are measured in the soil outside the 30-kilometer evacuation zone. Large parts of Japan are contaminated for at least 300 years, with cesium mainly in the northeast. Parts of this region will remain uninhabitable and unusable for agriculture. After a few days of the effects of the nuclear disaster could be seen worldwide, although of course extremely diluted, the global system of measure points registered radioactive iodine and cesium in the atmosphere. The release of medium and highly radioactive contaminated water, directly and through the groundwater, into the Pacific has already resulted in measurable exposure of marine organisms. Fishing of sand eels near the affected coast has been forbidden, but the radioactive particles are also spread and absorbed by algae, mussels, fish, and crabs. In the days that followed after the catastrophe, some 47,000 residents left their homes. Many people in the areas adjacent to the 20-kilometer evacuation warning zone also prepared to leave, and workers at the plant made several attempts to cool the reactors using truck-mounted water cannons and water dropping from helicopters. Those efforts met with some success, which temporarily slowed the release of radiation. However, they were suspended several times after rising steam and smoke signaled an increased risk of radiation exposure. Aftermath of the disaster. In the immediate aftermath of the nuclear reaction meltdown of the Daiichi power plant, the Tokyo Electric Power Company, TEPCO, which built, owns, and is responsible for the nuclear power station, constructed a containment wall around the site and was supposed to eliminate any ongoing risk from the effects of radiation contamination. However, in 2016, the company revealed that groundwater had been found seeping into and out of the site below the contamination wall. The water showed signs of radioactivity, and TEPCO announced that there was no available technology that could completely eradicate the risk of nuclear contamination of the groundwater. In 2017, TEPCO sent a robotic camera into Unit 2 and discovered that its level of nuclear radiation was virtually as high as the site as it was when it first began to leak. Clearly, much remains to be accomplished before a permanent and secure solution to the radiation issues at the Daiichi power station can be assured. In March 2020, TEPCO released a mid to long-term roadmap for the decommissioning of the Fukushima site. The company plans to begin the process of reducing wastewater accumulated in Fukushima's reactor building within 2 years. This will be another step in the slow but ongoing efforts to treat and dispose of radioactive waste that continues to contaminate the site. And that's it for today's video. Don't forget to smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and tell us what you want to see next in the comment section down below.